Easy guys, and welcome back to the lab. In today's WorldBox experiment I wanted to create 3 immortal kings. Powerful, each given a unique domain, building, fighting and healing. Placed into the same world, bound by the same purpose, to see whom was best. And over 2,500 years only one would survive. This is what it cost them. But before we start, I needed a realm worth protecting. A triangular continent, hills and mountains carving into 3 natural domains. To the south, fertile ground for kingdoms to grow. To the north, scorched earth, infernal biome, 3 volcanoes standing like sentinels over whatever lives beyond them. An ancient wall separates the two, for now. Next, our first immortal, Solen, our keeper, our defender. Born with genius, wisdom and ambition, as the first immortal he has high standards for himself and everyone around him. His immortality means he will never die from old age. He's also infertile, to avoid lots of mini-gods running around and imbalancing things. This is science, not a soap opera. Wait, I'm wrong, because Solen is a girl, with 12,000 health. It wasn't long before our king, not queen. Queen comes from the Old English quain, meaning wife, and Solen isn't anyone's wife. She's the sole ruler of an entire kingdom, so technically, by the internal logic of medieval titling, she's a king, which makes her a female king, not a queen. A king who happens to be a woman. The game agrees with me, it says king. I'm just following the science. We'll call her King Solen of Aidenvale. Next, her brother Idris, the healer, the diplomat, slow and deliberate, a pacifist with a healing aura built entirely around defense and diplomacy. Like his sister, infertile. On paper, the least threatening immortal in the room. For now, wait, I've already said that. Finally, the warrior Aldrich. Eagle-eyed, agile, strong, battle reflexes, bloodlust. Ambitious enough to start a fight and honest enough to finish it. Don't mistake him for a thug. Aldrich picks his battles for the right reasons, protecting his people, his family, doing what needs doing when nobody else will. Like his siblings, he's also had the snip. Science isn't always kind. In the beginning, life was simple. A valley amongst the trees, a world built for 3. It wasn't long before they developed their first shared culture, the verdant accord. Fast learners, a reverence for their elders, xenophiles, finding strength in difference rather than despite it, and true roots, a deep respect for where they came from. For a time, this was everything. Wait a second, Idris has fallen in love. What? How is this possible? He's fallen in love with his sister. Dude, you're messing up my lore. You're supposed to be siblings, bro. Anyway, things were going normally, absolutely fine. There was nothing incestuous at all. It wasn't long before Collis arrived, a handsome immigrant from the lands far away. Then there were 4, then 5. Edenvale began to grow. After 50 years of peace, a second village, Fleden, expanded north. Farms spread across the valley, and on the other side of it, freed from predators and common sense, the local rabbit population had completely lost the plot. They were like ants. Nobody planned for the rabbits. To the north, the scorched lands remained quiet. For now. I placed these volcanoes on a whim, but I'll be honest, I love them now. A span of molten lava standing as a gateway to whatever darkness lives beyond. Back in Aidenvale, however, the light still shone. A religion had formed. I named it Verdancy, granting citizens of strong bloodline the ability to cast protective shields. A third city, Tompentna, expanded north of Fleden. 100 years in, Solen carried only a spear. High diplomacy, high stewardship, no interest in armor. Idris the pacifist had gone completely in the other direction. Bronze armor, adamantite axe, one of the best weapons in the game. And Aldrich, 20% more damage than either sibling, had abandoned melee entirely in favor of a steel bow. The warrior had become a ranger. Nobody told him that wasn't allowed. By 200 years, the kingdom was stifling. 130 soldiers, 3 cities, not enough space, not enough resources. The science gods had grown impatient. Time for new variables. Dragons. 15 of them. A thunder of dragons. You guys called that one in the last Spore Dragon video. Came pouring down from the infernal volcanoes of the north. Tompentna was the first to burn. The archers mounted their defense and were engulfed before they could loose a second volley. The dragons were already at Fleden. The farmers ran. Meanwhile in Aidenvale, our immortals were asleep. That was until Idris smelt fresh bread, pork scratchings. Was Solen cooking? No, it was the farms, his people. He ran north through the forest, joined by Aldrich and Solen until they saw it. Tom Pentner was gone. Aldrich opened up with his bow like a machine gun, finishing the first dragon single-handed. Solen stepped out the flames looking like a roast chicken. That 12,000 health was doing a lot of work here. But it wasn't over. Fledden burned. The archers tried to hold the line but were engulfed. Fledden was already gone. Only Aidenvale remained. Aldrich on the front line, brothers and sisters, picking off dragons one by one. What a leg end. Absolute DPS output. The dragon threat remained. The Verdant Accord now knew what darkness lived in the north. Aldrich wrote a book for the annals. History and loss must never be forgotten. He called it An Empire in Legends. All who read it gained extra stats. Severely burned and disturbed by what happened, Solen called a meeting. 3 immortals in one village was a single point of failure. They had barely survived. One strike from the north and every guardian the god had placed would be gone. Together they were stronger, argued Idris. Together they were also one target. So they split. Idris traveled east beyond the mountains, a kingdom of healers, the Still Watch, focusing on serenity, diversity, and healing staffs. Aldrich took the west, a kingdom of warriors, the Iron Covenant, expansionists, focusing on fire weapons and training potential. Solen stayed. Someone had to rebuild. 3 kingdoms, 3 philosophies, 1 world to protect. Which one would last? The experiment had officially begun. It was not an easy start. The remaining dragons peppered each kingdom, slowing their growth. But by the year 250, Aldrich's town of Aradas and Idris's town of Stilldawn had held the ground, while Solen, along with the surviving population, had done well to rebuild Tom Pentner, considerably less toasty. Aidenvale not far behind, a new age of prosperity. Confusingly, Aldrich had had 4 children despite his infertility, so either his spouse had become overly friendly with the postman, or Aldrich had simply found a way. Persistence is a virtue. Idris, on the other hand, remained quite keen about his sister. No children, thankfully. But in the molten north, something new had arrived. Demons. Not the standard variety, these had prefrontal cortexes and advanced hippocampi, granting them the ability to form villages, cultures, and kingdoms. A subspecies I named the Devagorgons. They drank blood, but they fed on sunlight, and they had just founded their first city, Garadeth, a new variable. To the south, however, 3 kingdoms were blissfully unaware of the danger that awaited. Another 50 years passed. The immortal kings ruled their kingdoms, watched their people grow, watched them age. Aldrich had lost his wife to old age. Her escapades with the postman were over. He mourned, quietly, the way warriors do, the curse of immortality. Everyone he loved had an expiry date, except for him. He kept writing, books on war, tactics, experience, something to leave behind for people who wouldn't remember him writing it. Meanwhile, to the dark north, the demons had taken up farming. Amusingly, their fields of wheat caught fire repeatedly in the harsh conditions, which, given they drank blood and absorbed sunlight through their skin, raises questions about whose idea the wheat was. WorldBox insisted civilizations build farms. The Devagorgons complied. Badly. Another 250 years passed. Edenvale had amassed an impressive armor collection, and somewhere along the way the 3 kingdoms had formed an alliance, named, by the game's own random generation, Turtle Power. I love these moments. Given the chance, what would you have called the alliance? Leave it in the comments below. The religions changed constantly, each kingdom adopting and abandoning faiths at will. I gave up trying to influence them and let the science take care of itself. Both Idris, Solen, and Aldrich had amassed an impressive collection of steel gear, and they would need it. The Demon Empire was at the door, pushing up against the ancient walls that had held for hundreds of years. Walls that were, it turns out, significantly more reliable than the mountains, which had been quietly allowing members of the Verdant Accord to wander into the Iron Covenant unchecked. Where there's a will, there's a way. Over in Stilldawn, Idris wrote books on defense and economics. The Still Watch had grown into the largest of the 3 kingdoms, the most villages, the highest populations. To the north, Garadeth had developed a culture of its own, fiery weapons, dominion, happiness derived entirely from war, and frequent bouts of solitude and swearing. After 750 years, the science gods once again grew restless, and the walls came down. When Aldrich learnt of the darkness beyond the walls, his forces sprang into action first, urging his brothers to join a preemptive strike before the demons could attack them first. Solen and Idris hesitated, waiting to see how the demons played their hand, but it didn't matter. Aldrich's forces hit the demon village of Donny north of the old wall, but were overwhelmed. Cranin, the Iron Covenant's northern town, began to buckle. For Solen, things fared even worse. In the Verdant Accord, farms burned, the echoes of history repeating for those old enough to remember. And in the Still Watch, the northernmost city strained under wave after wave. The Iron Covenant was the first to break. Cranin fell first, but Aldrich had other ideas, marching through the battlefield, cutting through demon forces single-handed, taking the village back. Victory, brief, expensive, immediately irrelevant. News came in from the south. Tom Pentner was ash. Aidenvale was overwhelmed. Only a handful of Solen's best men remained at the town square, given barely a minute before the next wave came pouring through. Solen now fought alone, forces depleted. The Keeper, built for diplomacy, for defending, for holding things together, stood against the demon army by herself for hours, wave after wave, her defensive bubble working overtime, 12,000 health, then less. Desperate to even the odds, Aldrich's remaining forces pushed north and destroyed the demon village of Donny, forcing the enemy to regroup while Aldrich gave orders to rend assistance to Aidenvale and purge the demon blight. But it was too late. Solen had been left crippled in the attack. Her kingdom had fallen. Aidenvale, the first city, the oldest name in the realm, flying demon colors. She wandered aimlessly, crippled, still wondering if there was anything left worth rebuilding. Meanwhile, Idris had found a different solution entirely. Fighting his own version of the war to the east was dragging the demon horde toward the water, one of demonkind's few weaknesses. Quiet, methodical, effective, interesting, noted. Solen believed all was lost. She laid down her crown and submitted to the occupation. If she could survive inside it, guide what remained of her people through it, perhaps the legacy of the Verdant Accord could continue. Perhaps something could be saved. She was still the Keeper, even here, even now. Then Aldrich's reinforcements arrived from the north, cutting through the demon army, purging everything in demon colors. They found Solen. 800 years old, crippled from the invasion, dressed in the colors of the enemy she refused to become. His soldiers didn't know. They couldn't have known. Solen, the first immortal, the builder, the keeper, the king who was never a queen, was the first of the three immortals to fall. Aidenvale passed to the Iron Covenant. Aldrich heard what his soldiers had done. Aldrich grimaced. He had given that order. He said nothing. He turned north, took what was left of his army, barely a dozen men, and pushed into the demon heartland. He would eradicate every last one of them for this. There was nowhere in the world they could hide. Idris had survived the invasion, mortified by the loss of his sister. He laid down his crown and abandoned the Still Watch. There was nothing left to watch over. He went looking for his brother. Perhaps they could heal together. Perhaps something could still be salvaged from the wreckage of what they'd built. A child from the Iron Covenant found him first, or possibly a very small midget. Unclear. Covered in soot, the child told Idris of the rumors. Aldrich had gone north, into Garadeth, into the demon heartland itself. Suicide, Idris thought. Our warrior archetype knew no fear. They weren't rumors. Aldrich had found his way through the molten gates of the volcano and was cutting through everything in his path. Every demon, every twisted infernal structure, every last trace of the scourge that had taken his sister. But the demons weren't the only thing he was fighting. His own men had killed Solen. He had given that order. He didn't know, but that distinction meant nothing to a man like Aldrich. He was supposed to protect them. That was the entire point of his existence, and his soldiers had done what soldiers do. And where was Idris when Aidenvale fell? If they had listened, if they had struck first, none of this would have happened. The resentment had nowhere left to go. So when Aldrich turned and looked at his remaining soldiers, the men who had carried out his order, he attacked. The madness trait had found fertile ground. Aldrich threw his crown to the floor and marched to the remains of Garadeth. The demons, exhausted, depleted, were slain. And then he stopped, exhausted. Stopping was the mistake, because stopping meant feeling it. The guilt, the order he had given, the city his soldiers had found his sister in. He turned south, still moving, still destroying everything in his path, until he found Idris. Idris had come looking for his brother, and found something wearing his brother's face. Consumed by guilt and grief and the need to keep moving, Aldrich attacked, because Idris wasn't there when Solen fell, and that was Aldrich's truth now. Irrational, immovable. The two brothers fought. Aldrich was stronger, he always had been, and he knew Idris's defensive tricks. Every shield, every counter, they had shared a kingdom for too long. Idris couldn't match him, not directly. The warrior versus the pacifist. But Idris never needed to. As they battled towards the volcano, Idris waited, patient, deliberate, the way he had always been. Aldrich, too consumed by rage to see what was happening, where they were. Idris kicked him into the lava. Nobody but Obi-Wan Kenobi plans to end a war in a volcano. And yet, here we were. It's over, Idris thought. Let go of this folly, Aldrich. But Aldrich couldn't stop. As long as he was fighting, as long as he was destroying, he didn't have to feel the void inside himself. It was easier to blame everything around him than to look within. And Idris gave one last kick. Aldrich was gone. Only Idris remained. A scorched wasteland, king of nothing. No home, no family, no brothers, no sisters. He wandered for 18 years through the infernal wastelands, a nomad, the last immortal, walking the ruins of everything the gods of science had built for 3. Until one day, on the border of the infernal lands, Idris stopped. He built a village, small, quiet, and he told anyone willing to listen the lessons of what had come before. He named the village Solen's Vale, and he taught Solen's culture the verdant accord, not his own. He carried his sister forward because someone had to, and there was nobody but him. He didn't want victory. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want another war. He wanted the grass to grow back. What remained of the old kingdoms had reformed under the Iron Dawn, but Solen's culture, the verdant accord, lived on. Her books, her teachings. The first migrants arrive, and due to shared values, shared culture, an alliance of peace formed across the realm. Through tragedy and loss, war, death, and something that looked almost like rebirth, life went on. Over the next 1,000 years, Solen's Vale expanded, pressed between the heat of the north and the kingdoms of the south, until, without warning, the Age of Tears arrived, and the world wept. For 100 years the rains poured. The demons, those that had survived all this time through every war and every purge, were not defeated by armies, not warriors or weapons or bold preemptive strikes. They were defeated by the humblest things that God in his wisdom had put upon the earth. Water. And when the rain finally stopped, the land returned. Inch by inch the grass came back, the infernal seed decayed. The scorched earth, where 3 volcanoes had once stood like sentinels over whatever darkness lived beyond, cooled and solidified. Solen's Vale expanded with it, taking back the north, one village at a time. 2,500 years after God placed 3 immortal kings into the world, the realm finally knew peace. Idris was still walking. Before we go, I want to take a moment to thank all of my channel members who help keep the experiments funded and the lab lights on when the algorithm doesn't swing our way. You guys are awesome. And with that, goodbye.